Hey everybody, it's Insight number one. As you can see, I'm not at home. I'm at this beautiful beach in New Zealand called Porongaho, and right now it's really quiet, but this afternoon I've got cousins arriving and it's going to get really noisy, so I'm doing this now. Apologies for the sunnies, I am under here, but the sun is bright, so it's a beautiful, very cold, but very beautiful place to be in early spring. So hopes of summer, and this place would be amazing in summer. Ocean's just over there that way, which I don't think you'll hear, but I can hear it. Anyway, so this week in Come Follow Me, welcome again. We're in Corinthians 1 through 7. So this first one again, I'm just going to give you, these are going to be quick this week as much as I can because, you know, let's face it, I'm on holiday and they don't have a ton of notes either because I just haven't had the time and space to write them. But just listen and you'll get some upliftment, I'm sure. Okay, so 1st and 2nd Corinthians is in that same grouping, you know, we talked about when we started Romans, as Galatians and Romans, so written about the same time, but about 55 to 56 AD, while he was near the end of his 3-year stay at Ephesus. This is Paul, of course. He journeyed through Macedonia and Rome and Corinth. So this is to the Corinthians. Now, Corinthians was the meeting point of many nationalities because the main current trade of, I guess, between Asia and Western Europe passed through its harbours. So it was it's just like little seaport, but not so little. It's just like the trading place. So there's so much richness of diversity, nationalities, ideas, all those sort of things that you get in those kind of places that are so multicultural, rich, and have just different foods and like we love going to those places to discover things and find things, but they're not always the best for us, and the people there don't always behave the best because of that intermingling of everything. So this is his purpose for writing, or one of them anyway. Yes, that was a tui that flew past. Very beautiful. Okay, Paul's first visit there lasted nearly 2 years. So he was there like 2 years preaching and converting, planting the seeds of the gospel. His converts were mostly Greeks, gifted with a keen sense of the joys of physical existence. So like the Greek culture in that time was very, you know, like me, and you know, you see them laying out on couches, even the Romans, but the Greeks were known for like that lying down and being fed, and just everything was about physical pleasure, and that was just their culture for a lot of them that had money anyway, and those were the people that existed in this particular region in Corinth of the Greeks because of the trading and the money they could make. So that was the kind of people that lived there. They had a passion for freedom, but they were also quite genius. They had a gift for rhetoric and logic. So these were well-educated, smart people, but reared in the midst of the grossest moral corruption, undisciplined and self-conceited. So self-focused and, again, all about me. Sometime before 1 Corinthians was written, Paul paid them a second visit, and you can read that in 2 Corinthians. We'll get to that, in about 3 weeks, I think. 2-3 weeks. Yeah, one more week of 1 Corinthians, and we're into 2 Corinthians. And to check some rising disorder, again in 2 Corinthians, this time in chapter 2, and wrote them a letter which was now lost. You can read about that in 1 Corinthians 5:9. So he writes them a letter about that. We don't know where that is. Maybe it never made it there. We don't know. But we do find out that he does write another letter that we don't have. They had also been visited by Apollos as a missionary, perhaps by Peter, and that's suggested in 1 Corinthians 1:12, and by some Jewish Christians who brought them letters of commendation from Jerusalem. So they came in. Some of them were good, you know. So this is all information you can find in the Bible dictionary under the Pauline epistles, as in Paul wrote them epistles. So he starts off with salutations and thanksgiving, and that's in chapter 1, and it's quite nice to read 1 through 9, just the way he introduces himself. And then in 10 through on, he talks about foundation, and we're going to cover that more in chapter 2 because he continues in chapter 2 about foundation and how that is. But he does mention some things, very valuable, good scriptures in chapter 1 for that, around the wisdom of God. We're going to talk about that. He talks to them about marriage and morality and how that is. He also talks about meat offered to idols because there was a big sort of like, can you eat this, can you not eat this? And he's like, you know what, just agree that you might not agree, but could you have some respect? So that comes up. I'm not covering that one this week, but maybe you want to with your class, because when differences of opinion arise, you can say to them, do we actually have to agree on this? And they might be, well, actually, no. Fine. Just as an example, one of my dear cousins who's coming this afternoon, she is married to her wife, and I'm fully supportive of that. They're not members of the church, and like, I might not agree on same-sex relations the way she does, but do we have to? Actually, no, we don't. We can still be the best of friends and the closest of family members, and I can have total respect for her choices in life. And I'm not saying that gay is a choice, because gay is not a choice. Gay is something you're born with. It's not a bad, evil thing. It's just something that you have in you, and you decide what you're going to do with that, like any of us do, whether we're born with addiction or ugly hair or like whatever, right? We could be born bald and never have hair. There are people like that, and it's what you do with what you have is the decisions you make. That's what I mean in there. But you don't always have to agree 100% with everybody that you love and care about. Sometimes you can say, actually, we're going to disagree on that. Like, who to vote for? We're going to disagree on that. But actually, we don't need to agree on that. It's okay. So that he brings up as well. And there's some other things in there which we'll get to. He does talk about the degrees of glory, the doctrines of the resurrection, and that we'll get into next week. There's some good stuff in there that actually plays really nicely into Doctrine and Covenants. So I think you'll like that when we get there. But soon after this first epistle was written, because the second one he writes afterwards, but yeah, this one, he was driven from Ephesus. That you can read that in Acts 19 if you want to go back and have a look. And then he meets up in Macedonia, where he meets Titus, which is another book that we have later as well. He writes a letter to Titus. And he brought news from Corinth that his letter had been well received and produced their desired effect. So, like, what he said to them was effective. However, they weren't too happy about it. So, like, okay, we'll comply, but we're not going to really like you anymore. So it kind of separated them in their closeness. Basically because he ended their good time partying. And I think that would be true of any of us. You know, they'd be like, oh, party pooper, you came in and ruined our party. Except their party wasn't really doing any good for them. It's causing a lot of issues and a lot of problems, but they were still in that very learning phase, and we can be in that too. So there's some really good things this week. We're going to talk about a couple of them. We're going to talk about accomplishing God's work and how we need his wisdom. And we're going to talk about planting, watering, and then God increases. We're going to look at foundation in that. And problems with immorality, and then marriage is an effort but worth it, because what Paul says here, if you read it like verbatim as he did, no one would ever get married. But that's actually not what he means. So we're going to talk about that too. So hang around. These are good. Again, not with many notes, but listen in and I'll try and be quick with them. Alright, hang around. I'll see you for the next one soon.